In chapter 2, beginning with verse 8, we see the smallest of St. John's 7 letters to the 7 churches of Asia Minor. It says, "And to the angel of the church in Smyrna, write this." This is the Agora of Smyrna, and it's the place where business was done and government work as well. The crowds gathered. And so this is a good place to which to send this letter. It's one of the shortest, but it's also one of the 2 letters of St. John to the 7 churches that is completely positive in regard to the character of the Christians in the community. He says, "Thus says the first and the last, who has become dead and lives." Now keep in mind, this is a very important title. Jesus calls himself the first and the last. And he's the one who was dead and became alive. One of the reasons that that is so important is because in the book of the prophet Isaiah, God says, "I'm the first and the last." If God says he's the first and the last, and Jesus, who died and came back to life, also calls himself the first and the last, it is clear that in this text, Jesus is identifying himself as God. He makes that very strong and clear for anyone who knows the Old Testament. And oftentimes, those communities such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, who try to focus on the book of Revelation, but they use it to try and deny the divinity of Christ, are skipping over this whole verse. And it's one we may not skip. But then after identifying himself as the one who died and came back to life, the one who is God, the first and the last, he says, "I know your affliction and your poverty, though you are rich." Now, this is an odd thing, first of all, because the city of Smyrna is a very important seaport, not only today, but in ancient times as well. And this was a rich town. Why are the Christians poor? The reason that they're called poor is because either they were drawn from the poor classes or they became poor. That is, the local people who were very wealthy somehow excluded them and kept them out of the economic mainstream. And they became poor because of their faith in Christ. So those are the 2 possibilities. And the second one makes good sense. But let's continue on here, where it says, "Even though you're poor, but you are rich." Now, the richness that Christ speaks of is the richness of grace. They're rich in the Christian life, and that overcomes their material poverty. And that you also have accepted blasphemy. Blasphemion is the Greek word here, and it means reviling. They have taken reviling from those who call themselves Jews, but are not. Rather, they are the synagogue of Satan. Now, this means that in the 90s, there's this tension going on between the Jewish community and the Christian community. And St. John, himself Jewish, from the Holy Land itself, he's saying that those that call themselves Jews, but they are not. They're really a synagogue or a gathering of Satan because they are trying to persecute the Christians and maybe be the ones who are helping to cause their poverty. So that's the tension that exists. "Fear not the things you are about to suffer." So they've been going through some problems, but there's still more to come. "Behold, Satan is about to cast from you some members of your community into jail or prison, so that you may be tested or tempted. And you will have affliction for 10 days. Now, by 10 days, that's a code probably for 10 years. There's going to be a persecution that they're experiencing. His command to them in the face of persecution is, "Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life." Fidelity to the point of death, not just making an act of faith at the beginning of your Christian life, But staying faithful even to the point of death, all through persecution, is the norm that we Christians are to live out. Let the one who has ears hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be conquered by death or by the second death. That is, those who conquer in faith and stay faithful to Christ to the end will not be undone by the second death that comes at the resurrection of the dead. We'll all have a first death, but then at the end of time, there'll be a second death that comes when those who are condemned are cast into the lake of burning fire. And that second death, that judgment that comes for sin, will not afflict those who are faithful to Christ all the way to the end.